Hello, my name is Tara Welling, and I'm working on a new idea. Now, oh, by the way, please subscribe to this YouTube channel and hit the bell next to it because that'll give you alerts as to when I do new videos, which I will be doing regularly because this is how I function. This is how I do things. I talk it out first, and then after I talk it out, I then write down what I said. So, hello, my name is T.R. Welling. I'm going to be discussing with you today an idea that first started. Now, one of the things that I have done is that I use lots and lots of fictional references, mostly TV and some books, movies, and such, in order to be able to explain extremely complicated things in moving pictures and other authors' works in order to be able to use a simple variable like Harry Potter's The Room of Requirement in order to be able to demonstrate extremely complicated ideas using the smallest amount of words possible, which is the definition of a mathematical variable. So this idea originated with, I was having a conversation with a now ex-friend acquaintance that lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and this individual and I were having a discussion, and it came about that I started to use the reference of a gymnasium. Well, room of requirement is much more accurate. You're going, which I came up with which that definition is actually much more accurate, and I came out with in the last few minutes, trying to discuss this with Emma, which is a whole nother story, can of worms. So as you're walking around someplace and you think that a doorway is just a doorway. This is the description I gave with this ex-acquaintance of mine. And our acquaintanceship ended about 12 to 14 hours ago, give or take, in that time period. Although it actually ended about 36 or so hours ago, because it ended yesterday morning. I just didn't catch on to it until 2 a.m. That's the negative part about being neuroatypical, is that the normal social interaction stuff, they're trying to say A and you're hearing X, and they don't want to make it any more clear, and you're struggling with why are you saying X? I don't understand, because there's something else obviously there's going on behind the scenes, but I don't get it. Well, I'm good at historical and mathematical. There's more going on here than meets the eye, but you only see, you don't see the ecology of an apple orchard. All you see is the apple. So you're walking around and you see a doorway, or you see an opening or a hatch or some kind of a passageway between the room where you're in, or the area where you're in, or your thing where you're in, into another area, and you think that area is going to be really, really small, but in truth it is monstrously gigantic. A gym or two, or three or four, or an entire warehouse, or what have you. Okay. So, which is actually this morning, 20, 30 minutes ago or so, I came with actually it's not really a gym, it's more of a room of requirement, because in the Harry Potter novels, the room of requirement could expand almost exponentially. There was so much stuff in that specific room of requirement versus the go past in Harry Potter, you go past the room of requirement, and that room will show it's a good room for the Dumbledore's army to meet and practice and get good at defense against the dark arts skills and talents and such. And this is the room that they specifically created for this would be a room that had been expanding exponentially since the beginning of Hogwarts, because it is a place where broken things, um, experiments gone awry, and other assorted various and assorted situations. That's where the Hogwarts students would put whoopses and mistakes. They would put in the room a requirement, and then it would be no longer a problem, and I'm not going to get punished for it. So, what I'm really, really good at is I'm good at finding rooms of requirement inside various and assorted situations. For example, last night, I almost made a recording of this last night that, more like about 12, 10 hours ago, of Dennis, the Venus. Now, a while ago, I defined mathematically. I determined that Gene Roddenberry created the Enterprise based off of standing on the eastern side of the western half of the western face of side of the Roman Forum. He was standing on the more of the eastern section of it, not too far away from the Temple of Caesar. And in front, there's a couple of buildings between the Temple of Caesar and the Villa Hill, which the entire top of the Villa Hill is covered with the Temple of Venus. Well, then my mind, and then of course, fairly steep angle, pyramid-like, fairly steep angle to the south would be the Palatine Hill and the Domus Juliae, and then matched by a similar degree angle up to the Imperia Fora, and that's the engine room, the warp core, and then up to the warp engines, the nacelles up here. Both of these buildings had special religious stuff from the city of Troy in them, which is critically important for what I'm about to talk to you about. Now, before the city was renamed and the Roman gods were created, because there was no such thing as Roman before the event of the Memento Mori ceremony became functionalized and organized based on, and Romulus used that ceremony, although he modified it just a hair, to he killed his brother Remus, and he then had interactions with probably a Sabine female or some other female that was in the area, and he then paraded his brother's dead body around the city, going, "I'm king. Me, I'm ruler, I'm king, I'm me, I'm me. I am the state." So that ceremony was the foundation of Rome. Well, before that, the Villa Hill was there, and there was a temple on top of it. Well, that temple, before it could not have been, that temple, the Temple of Caesar wouldn't be built until after the assassination, until after Julius Caesar lost his bow test, for lack of a better description. There's another gymnasium up and behind. There's another room of requirement up and behind the whole Iliad and Odyssey thing, because the Odyssey actually took place in Rome proper. Well, half of it took place on the west side of Rome proper, and half of it took place on the east side of Rome proper. And this is illustrated by the fresco on the west wall of the Sistine Chapel, that is a highly characterized, highly poetic, licensed, highly fictionalized version of Odysseus and his crew battling the Sirens, because that battling the Sirens was an event that actually took place in the wetlands, the marsh, the river, the tributary, the lagoon. I don't know. There's a dozen different words to describe what it is. Where the Colosseum sits is where the Domus Aurea, the palace of Emperor Nero, not his real name, and the real Nero had evacuated out of Rome years before, so the name was available. So Paul took that name as emperor. Yes, the evil priest Paul. That's what the Dead Sea Scrolls called him. So that's what I'm going to call him, because the apostles that were still alive at the time hated him with a passion, and he hated them with a passion, and he made his passions known by going to full scale war against them, and by mass murdering as many of the followers of Jesus as he could, Simon Peter as he could, and promoted his own version, which is the reason why he had a significantly large army, and he had a significantly larger amount of money, which means the Senate couldn't kill him, so they had to promote him to Pharaoh. They just gave him his new Pharaoh name, Emperor slash Pharaoh. Emperor slash Pharaoh was a thing previous to Vespasian, because there's a whole to do with the whole situation 70, 75, 80 CE, when the end of the Julio-Claudio line ended and the beginning of the Vespasian line began, and did not last long. Vespasian, Titus, and Domitia. And that's Vespasian, Domitia, and Titus and Domitia is who finished construction on the Colosseum from the parts from King Solomon's temple, and that is directly referenced, talked about in Mark chapter 13, which is where Jesus is talking about, take down every single solitary brick. What was edited out by among others the bishops of Lyon in 120, circa 120, that decade and a half, where the bishops of Lyon had ordered their followers to gather up all the gospels so that they could review them, so they could see which ones they liked and which ones they didn't. The ones that were not liked were destroyed. The ones they liked were modified to make an even better story for Paul, and try to take out as much of the message and the ideas and the concepts of Jesus as humanly possible, or Simon Peter as humanly possible, including the concept of the Pharaoh, and because when the Romans conquered Egypt, they absorbed the title of Pharaoh, so it was Emperor Pharaoh, which is, and Caesar kept his name of Caesar, although that may or may not be that accurate, because there was aspects of him that was Gaius. There was Gaius and Caesar. Well, was Caesar the Latin version of the name of the Scorpion King Pharaoh Narmer, and that name literally means to strike, to impact, to cause damage, for object A to impact, to alter the trajectory. Newton's rule 1, rule 2, anything acted upon, it has an equal and opposite reaction. Well, that Newton's third law, object 1, rule 1, objects at rest tend to stay at rest. Rule 2, object in motion tend to stay in motion. 3, equal and opposite reaction, as in if object A interferes with the motion, the trajectory of object B, that's 3. Equal and opposite. It will impact equal and opposite. This will absorb part of the motion and speed and velocity and such of this object. That's what Caesar's name is. That's what his name translates to, which is the same thing that Narmer's name translates to it from 3200 BC, the first pharaoh of a unified Egypt, which is where the tradition of the 5 pharaoh names came from, and which is the reason why there was, up until Nero, there was laws regarding emperors had to have a new pharaoh, had to have a new throne name, although that tradition was picked up by the popes and carried forward to the present day. Almost all popes had a throne of St. Peter's new name, minus Simon Peter, although there is direct physical evidence in the Gospels referencing to translation through a translation. It says, I stand on the Ben stone. I, Pharaoh, stand on the Ben stone. Call me Simon Peter. Or in Latin, The Latin Peter translates to build. Simon translates to house or house of worship or build. And upon would be on the ben stone, and me is saying I am Pharaoh. So build your house upon me translates, that's an excessively bad translation. It actually means I accept the title. I Simon Peter accept the title of Pharaoh standing on the ben stone. That's what it actually translates to. That's what it actually means. If you go to etymology about it, I'm not sure why etymologists have not made those connections before, but I guess the Vatican and their 1,400 years worth of "if you question our authority, we will happily kill you" has some kind of an effect on that etymology. So you have before the invention of the Roman culture, the Roman gods and such, they were still operating off of previous stuff. So the city of Samhain, which is what it used to be called, the city of seven hills, which has been the nickname of Rome for almost the entire time. Well, the letter seven, the number seven did not exist yet. It would not exist until post 500 BC, when the Arabic number system was created. The Arabic number system being 1 to 9, the 0 being added later on. That's a mathematical thing. So you have 7 didn't exist, so they couldn't use the number 7, the city of seven hills. They couldn't use it. The letters S, E, V, and N did not exist yet either. That's also Latin, so therefore they couldn't use those to name the city. So it's a sound thing. It's not seven, it's Sabin. And in Manx Gaelic, Sabin it's spelled Samhain. Seven, or Samhain, Sabin, is the nickname, is the old name of the city of Rome. Well, there was a million people living in the area, despite the fact that the early Roman propaganda was not interested in saying that. They were interested in telling Romulus just how wonderful and fantastic and awesome he was. Okay, now part of this story is included in the Iliad, in the Odyssey, excuse me. The Iliad is actually the name of the city and the people. The word Trojan is actually an extremely deep N-word type insult to Jews. However, this story is semi-depicted by the works of Leonardo da Vinci and the west wall of the Sistine Chapel, the materials of the Sistine Chapel are literally from the south outer wall of the temple of the Colosseum, and the Colosseum's materials came from the temple of Caesar back to Mark chapter 13. Do not leave a single stone on top of each other. Dismantle the whole building and take all the materials to Rome and reassemble the great El Bethel on the city of pillars. That is where the Colosseum would be in 50 years. Really complicated. However, back before the room of requirement on this specific subject is that before the Villa Hill had a temple on it. That temple based on mathematics of the next centuries and the next millennia and such. That temple has direct physical contact with the modern masonry. Well, the post several centuries later from 70 AD, the masonry, because the buildings of the road to the south, to the direct south of the Villa Hill, there used to be a ladder there. Well, behind you is the Arch of Claudius, which was renamed 80 years later for the Arch of Titus, after about 1,000 modifications to the design. Claudius started to build the Arch of Claudius on day 1, and through his several decade reign, the Roman Senate blocked him on every single solitary turn they could possibly imagine, and then Nero didn't help at all. because Nero hated Claudius with an absolute passion, because Nero was trying to pretend he wasn't who he was. He was trying to pretend, oh yeah, no, I'm a member of the Julii family. No, you're not. In fact, you like seeking out and killing Julii family members. So no, it's not so much. You're not a Julii family member. You're not a Julii. And he was dispatched. And although ironically he was dispatched about the same time, give or take similar time as the eruption of Pompeii. Now Vespasian, his death was also strongly connected to Pompeii. A statistical analysis can be stated that the last 6 months of his life were an invention, and he actually was in Pompeii seeking out Jews and seeking out Christians and killing them, because that's one of the things that Vespasian did the best, is he went out to find and kill Jews and Christians, because they were threatening the authority of the Roman Empire. So when Vespasian was suddenly killed, his family had to invent months of his life in order to be able to not have him, because being killed by the god Vulcan was it's difficult to define how bad of an omen to the Roman people. The emperor being killed by Vulcan through a volcanic eruption, which is the word Vulcan the word volcano comes from the word the Roman god Vulcan. In Greek, his name was Hephaestus. I love watching Warehouse 13. I love it. Fantastic, beautiful. Because this came from watching I'm part of the way through watching, which episode I'm watching? I'm watching season 3, episode 8, The 40th Floor, and so Warehouse and Paris and the whole slobber thing from that reminded me of Hephaestus, which reminded me of Vulcan, which reminded me of Vespasian and the Colosseum and the Domus Aurea, which actually that name there. You can find the Ogle family name in about 5 separate major locations in and directly around the Roman Forum. The road that runs down the middle of the Forum is called the Amber Road. Okay, that's translation. Its actual name is the Sacred Road, but the sacred color of Rome is reddish. Red, amber is slightly similar. So the Amber Road, the original inhabitants, the Ogle family, the Ogle family created Britain. They named Britain from Prince Brutu of the city of Ilia. He was a prince of Ilia, and his title and name his titles and name was changed by the Latins later on, like more than half a millennium, almost 1,000 years later. His name was changed to make the Romans feel more pleasant and happy about themselves. Anyway, the reason why I brought up the Odyssey is because Caesar lost his bow challenge. He was stabbed with 13 different blades. Well, those blades were actually arrows, because he was taken to Traitor's Post, put on trial for his Jewness. He's being a Jew and an emperor at the same time, both of which were extremely illegal. Emperors couldn't be Jews. Romans and the Senate tolerated Jews on a good day and killed them on a bad day. No, sorry, let's make that more specific. On a good day, they let them live and be slaves. On an average day, they would kill them as sacrificial victims to Janus to be able to perform the memento mori ceremony. As in, a Jew would be selected out and then dispatched like Romulus killed Remus, and then the success of the city was assured because of that direct interaction. I would have really liked to have worked this out and talked and communicated with my ex-acquaintance in Tulsa, but that's what happens. So that person, our paths separated, and that is the way it goes. I'm excessively sad about it, but there's nothing to be done about it, because that path is that person's path is that person's path. Mine is diverging and doing this, and stop getting in fate's way. You get punished pretty hard if you get in fate's way too much. So, hence the last 3 days of difficult situations. So, the Homer wrote about his, legendarily speaking, his grandfather's stories of the Trojan War, being his grandfather being Odysseus. Now, that whole section had to be in the last through 10 languages and 700 years from the end of the Trojan War to the point where it was translated into Latin after Latin was finally invented. It was translated into Latin just about a full 1,000 years after the Trojan War ended. So the story that we're most familiar with, the Greek Latin version of it, wasn't invented until the Roman Empire, because that's about the same time the Greek and Roman civilizations were created about the same time. Although the Greeks were never called the Greeks, they were called Spartans or Athenians or any of a couple hundred other cities in the Aegean. That's what they were called. They were called, Cretans or whatever. The city-states. You were a citizen of the city, not the citizen of the Aegean. Although there were some scholars that were bouncing around the idea of Greek, which the Romans then, after the conquering and conquest, then took those papers and said, "Oh, this is a good idea. Let's label them Greek instead of labeling the Athenians or Spartans or whatever other works you want to describe to them." So the bow test is described in detail at the end of the Odyssey, although it has been modified considerably over the last from 500 BC to present. It has been modified radically, and each ruler tends to make their own modifications because the aspects of the stories that they like get emphasized, and aspects of the stories they don't like, obviously they are altered, or the authors are killed and new authors are brought in to do what the ruler wants. Now, what the title of that ruler, those vary from Caesar to king to emperor to ruler to warlord to pope. So you have the description of the bow test comes at the end of the Odyssey, and Odysseus passes his bow test. Well, Caesar failed his bow test because instead of being able, he went into a bow test without a bow, or even if he did go into the bow test with a bow, he still was shot, and his 13 attackers, 13 attackers, fired arrows, and those arrows penetrated, and he was eventually killed, dispatched in some way, either by an arrow to the heart, or Brutus or somebody came up to him and literally put a blade into his heart, and that was the end of the conversation. This is a historically accurate thing, which shouldn't be inappropriate for kids, because most kids either know about this, or because the Ides of March is not exactly a subtle thing, and it's a PD thing for almost all Western culture. All a child has to do is say, "What's the Ides of March?" and their parents are going to explain that it's the day Julius Caesar was executed. So, executed, killed, what's the difference between those words? Only the manner of which the person had lost their mortal coil. So that battle is depicted in the battle of Odysseus and the Sirens and the Cyclops and that kind of stuff is depicted extremely fictionally, extremely poetic, like the wall of the Sistine Chapel. Now, what's really interesting about this is that if you walk toward the Colosseum with the Arch of Claudius Titus behind you, and you walk toward the Colosseum, You're literally walking, you're literally performing the actions of the Psalm 23. You're literally walking in the shadow of death because the Colosseum is directly in front of you. A building that was built for the specific purpose of turning Jews into fuel to fuel the Janus aspects of the Memento Mori ceremony, which would then gain favor with Janus, who would then give prosperity and fertility and such to the Roman Empire itself. So as the empire grew, the Senate and the politicians and such decided that the more games, the more fuel to soul energy would be then used to power the empire, and they could maintain an empire that was nowhere in the neighborhood of small. It covered northern Africa, most of Europe, part of the Levant lands, and was in a portion of the island of Britain, not Scotland and not Ireland, but a portion of that areas. Well, that's not a small area. 3 continents is not anywhere in the neighborhood of small, and they had enemies coming up all the time, so they felt like they needed fuel from the souls of those removed of their mortal coil to be able to continue powering it and continue having the power infrastructure and dynamic. Repeating, basically, it's their entire Roman Empire. If you break it down to the most basic of basic human behavior patterns, the Roman Empire were serial killers who used the ceremony of ritual killing in order to be able to human sacrifice to be able to do basically the same thing the Aztecs were doing, which kind of brings the question, were the Aztecs in some way descendants from the Romans? And DNA, I'm guessing, kind of points in that direction. There's some evidence of a Roman galleon or two in at least one seaport in South America. So the Romans moving around and moving north from there is not outside of the realm of possibilities in any way, shape, or form. All the really big Roman galleon would have had to do was to sail out, be hit with a storm, and then be 4 or 5 or 6 days out from land. And at that point, well, you just follow the trade current, the trade current off of Africa around, and it'll either take you up into America or down into Brazil. And this one happened to just follow the trade rounds, and they didn't have a compass, so they were getting caught in a storm, being pushed 2, 3, 4, 5 days out from the side of land. They had no idea how to get back to land. So and if they were in that much of a storm, they could have been battered by storm after storm after storm after storm, which just kept pushing them farther and farther and farther west till the point where they hit the coast of Brazil. And what do you do then? Do you try to go back home, or do you set up a new shop in the new home? Well, obvious, you set up a new shop in the new home because you don't know how to get back. You have no idea that the trade runs just sail south and then across the ocean again to Africa, then sail up to the coast of Africa. Well, they didn't know that, so the ritual sacrifice of the Colosseum is directly in front of you. The Colosseum, the place where mass murder takes place every weekend, every few days. There's sometimes that when during special events where games would last for a couple of months, 50, 60 days of games. Well, that's 2 months, and if you have 2 to 20 people being killed every day in that 60 days, what part of this is not ritualized serial killing? The reason why I say serial is because the batches were not just fighters go out there and fight. No, the forms and if you were in this type of getup, you fought this way, and if you were in that type of getup, you fought that way, and they were paired off, gladiator style A versus gladiator style B, D versus C, E versus F. They would fight that way, so therefore the movements that they were allowed to do were serialized. So this is the base definitions. So gladiator fights were literally sanctioned serial killers because they killed the people. The gladiator was killed basically in the same way, similar way, than all the other people wearing that the same costume for the previous several hundred years and for the several hundred years forward. So you're walking in the shadow of death. You will fear no evil. Thou art with me. The rod and thy staff are protecting me. Well, halfway down the road, from the Arctitis to the end of the Temple of Venus would be a ladder that would take you up. Well, that's where Dante got his story, and he was walking. He walked that direction. Virgil direct with the writer of the Iliad, which is the story of the Iliad of Ilias, Aeneas, who was the technically speaking founder of the city of Alba Longa. That was in the mouth. It was a city of pillars in the mouth of the Tiber River. That was destroyed by Romulus and Remus. As they were destroying it, the army of the city of Samhain came out to defend the city of Alba Longa, and they were defeated. And Romulus sent word ahead, going, "Throw open your gates and surrender to me, or I will direct my energy to the city, and I will destroy the entire city. So throw open your gates and accept me as king, or else." And that's exactly what they did. And then the city of Samhain became known as the city of Rome. To honor, he changed the name of the city to honor himself, much like Alexander would do in 1,000 years. Well, 500 years. So, previous to all that, the Villa Hill had on it another temple. And I proposed that that temple's name was Queen of Sheba. And that temple was designed to reflect the aspects and ideas of the Queen of Sheba. That's what because if you another video I explained it a little bit better, that the going in the sky bridges, the catwalks and such, from the Temple of Venus to the city of pillars, from the city of pillars to the palace of Claudius, from the palace of Claudius to the Domus Juliae, and from the Domus Juliae back, that's a circle. That circle, that completed circle, is the circle of Freemasonry, of a path master. They do their path of masonry from outside up the spiral staircase into the 3-story building. They do the EA, the FC, and the Master Mason. Then cross to the City of Pillars, and they start working on lodge stuff. And then they cross to the Temple of Claudius, and then they start working on the Grand Lodge stuff. And you go from the Grand Lodge stuff, then you start working on you go to the Domus Juliae, and you start working your way up the chairs of the Grand Lodge to become Grand Master. And then after you become Grand Master, you return to the Temple of Venus, which I hypothesize used to be called a reference to the Queen of Sheba, and that whole situation in there. So that explains those things. Dante figured that part of it out. Masonry figured part of that out. Leonardo da Vinci figured part of that out. What I'm good is each one of these little things is each one of these little things that the Enterprise and the Dante's, where Dante got his, and the story of Aeneas and Aeneas' journey to hell and back, as well as Virgil's travel to hell and back, and Dante's travel to hell and back, as well, and Jesus's travel to the afterlife and back, as well as the fact that the reason why to perform half the reason why to perform the Memento Mori ceremony in the first place itself is to send a victim 1A to the afterlife in your stead, so that you have, in game terminology, an extra life, which is then sealed upon by being with a person of your choice, orientation, your orientation, their orientation, person of your choice. Whether or not it's their choice or not, that's entirely arbitrary compared to based on the Roman Empire. The victim does not have choices. the victim has to comply or it doesn't end well. So you know the 1A, and then the soul transference of the game terminology, an extra life when that person or the politician or the soldier goes into battle. This time they are immortal. At least they think they're immortal because someone is standing in the afterlife in their stead. 1C is how you do that. 1C is how you get there. Part 2 is the celebration of Janus to make sure that your actions were okay according to Janus, because Janus is the one who would then provide you with either yes, good, or not so much. And how you'd determine that is by okay. C is half a circle. C is half a circuit. Well, the reason why I call it 1C is because when you go to the other side, when you're on the other side, C, half a circle, half a circuit. Well, then Janus has some opinions on the circuit, which completes the circuit. And the Roman definition of genius is different than the modern definition of genius, because the Roman definition of genius is that anyone in the population could get an idea, a spark of inspiration, a eureka moment, oh, I figured something out. Well, I consider those things when you look for them, when you train your mind to see them, and you really spend decades of your life working to find rooms of requirement, that's an aspect of 1C. That's an aspect of the genius. Part 3 is genius, where you go, hey, yo, go ahead and cognitive field, quantum field, give me a spark, give me a genius input, and you go from there. That's how the population would be able to determine complete the circuit and give me the idea. Well, I'm really good at finding rooms of requirement. I'm really good at finding where things have been hidden, and in effect, Janus leads me to. Now, I say Janus is a real physical thing because one, it pops ideas into people's minds called inspiration or a spark of genius, or there's dozens and dozens of other explanations. It also, since it's electrical impulses, can move the body and can move the mouth to be able to say and speak things. Well, part of my Erdology has been about taking those actions, the physical motions and the things and the thought thing through things, and using the rules of behavioralism to take those motions, variable them, and then but label the variables not in an arbitrary A B C D E way, but using an ancient language that is the parent of Hebrew, which is the Elder Futhark, and using that sequence as both letters and numbers. Well, when you start having repeat numbers, like everyone who every 365.4 days minus and then every fourth year you have 366 days. When that occurs, when that happens, you have a functionality and a structure that points to gotta breathe. Points to the fact that those 66 days are from one forward are numbers. Well, those numbers are also letters. Well, there's not one fixed point to measure from. January 1st is just an arbitrary statistical analysis. The real fixed points of the calendar are the 8 fixed points of the equinoxes and solstices of the midsummer, midwinter, and the 3 others. The December 21st, February 2nd, March 22nd, May 1st, June 22nd, August 22nd, August something, September 22nd, October 31st, and then back to December 22nd again. Well, those are. There's a third form of physics. There's a third aspect of statistics, where you take a fixed point that has wiggle room inside of it, but it's never outside of these parameters. And then from this fixed point to this fixed point, This is the form of statistics that the elder Futheric operates from, and this mathematics and this specific what I've created is Ordology, which studies the patterns of the Earth revolving around the sun. And there's 8 fixed points the Earth passes through on every year on its journey around the sun. Well, when you have that, then you can translate the groups of numbers that repeat to groups of letters that repeat. Well, repeating groups of letters is called a word, or a collection of words, or a sentence, or a paragraph, chapter, so on and so forth. There's a lot of information found that can be found in here that needs to be found and decoded. Well, this is part of this information is part of why the Dark Ages occurred, and the Dorian Dark Age occurred, and the previous Dark Ages occurred, is to erase this information from existence. Janus doesn't like that, or the Roman Empire would still be in existence, or any one of a dozen cultures that came before the Roman Empire, they would still be in existence. Janus doesn't like having this information destroyed, because this is how to interact with Janus. This is the language of Janus. So as Janus is the two-headed Siamese deity of the Roman Empire, where you have one face looking west and one face looking east, and the west face is the past, the west, the gone, the yesterday, and the east face is tomorrow, east, orbital east, as the Earth goes into goes along with the path of its orbit around the sun. Orbital east, orbital west. West is the past, east is the future. This is illustrated in December and January by, you have an old man with a really, really long white beard looking that direction, and you have an infant or a very small toddler looking east. Well, that's Janus. And as you work more and more with and around the concept of Janus, the more you're able to figure out, work with, and determine whether or not Janus likes an idea or not, and then completes the circuit, and then creates the Roman concept of genius, which is okay, is this the west face, a bad idea of Janus, or is this the east face, the good idea of Janus? Now, this Siamese twins thing of Janus is also Janus is a direct copy from the pyramids of Rome, pyramids of Egypt, and the pyramids of Egypt have the Janus Siamese twins built into the infrastructure. The spinal cord, the Jeffries here down to the bent pyramid, it follows the spine. From mid-spine up is one face, and from mid-spine down is the other face. So, the room of requirement, you look for the hidden gems. You look for each one of these points along the way that I pointed out that people don't know about, even though it's the information is there, it's not been assembled into a good solid understandable statistical format yet, and not reviewed by the scientific community, although none of the points that I brought up can be argued with. It's just observing the facts in a different light, minus the Vatican, minus the propaganda, minus politicians being jerks about it. It's just examine the evidence as the evidence. Just facts, ma'am, just the facts. Well, let's just keep with the facts. There's no way that the city, that Rome was built in a day. That's just statistically impossible. So there had to be a city there before. How do we know there was a city there before? Well, Romulus and Remus grew up in that city, and there was people around, and there was farms, and there was villages, and there was all other types of infrastructure, because they grew up on the Palatine Hill. Well, they were not raised by wolves. They were taken care of by wolves, and then they were until they were found by humans they were found in a very, very similar to the aspect of what Spartans did. The Spartans would leave an infant out overnight or for a period of time, and if the child survived or what have you, then they were adopted and made a full Spartan. If they were not adopted, or there was something wrong with the child, then the local villagers would then pick that child up, and that child would no longer be a Spartan. That child would be, in effect, a slave that would and the slaves were then would then work to support the Spartan warriors or the Spartan females, and the Spartan females their job was to support their husband and produce children, so that there could be plenty of new Spartans to fully train to be the best trained warriors of their time. Same kind of concept. So Romulus and Remus were left out, and they were picked up and taken to the Palatine Hill, and they were raised and they were taken care of and such. Well, there had to be some kind of infrastructure to be able to do that, because there was humans there. There was adult humans there, and it wasn't just a blank field with two people there. There was an infrastructure of people around it. You can't. It's really difficult to live 100 miles away from nowhere and be able to survive with all the ramifications of wild animals and harsh weather and so on and so forth. It's really hard to do that, but it is possible to do that if you have lots and lots of people around. So you have lots and lots of people around, especially in that specific area. There used to be some serious beasts around there that would do massive damage to humans unless you lived together and had some people looking after the kids and some people looking after the infrastructure, and then the warriors and on a shield wall type thing facing off the enemy. It's very easy to live in that kind of a situation, because then it's instead of you versus something that can kill you easily, it's a group of humans that are not easy to kill in a group versus one or so animals. Then it becomes, okay, looks like that animal's what we're eating tonight, unless the animal runs away too easily before it's too injured. So you have the foundation of Rome and what was called beforehand. So this began as I needed to took almost an hour to get at the absolute basics of what a gymnasium room of requirement is, because every one of those points has been a different room of requirement that I found heavy duty information inside of that room. Some gymnasiums are smaller, and some gymnasiums are monstrously huge, and they have their own rooms of requirement off of them. So it becomes a sequential thing. Now, the Elder Futhark comes in a sphere form, and that sphere, that the sphere of the Elder Futhark, that can be defined as this room of requirement or that gym. Now, because the specific information you look into is an encapsulated thing. Well, I've often gone from, okay, let's explore this room, and gone, oh, there's a room over here, and there's a room over here, and there's a room over there. So the sequences of information, this gym leads to that gym, leads to this gym, leads to that gym, or at least from this 8 to this 8 to this 8 to this 8 to that 8. I would really like to be able to animate this, but animation takes so bloody long. So anyway, I watched Warehouse 13 several days ago and got the idea for the gym, or what I'm now calling the room of requirement. And I was watching this episode that I spotlighted, that I defined before, and the room that I found before was about Warehouse 13, and that the Warehouse 13 has a very interesting connection with this information, because there's been about 40-ish cities of pillars. Well, if you take a city of pillar and convert it to the fictional format of Warehouse 13 or Noah Wiley's The Library, although Warehouse 13 fits a little bit better because there's been multiple different libraries. Well, instead of having one library at a time, there was a couple different libraries, and evidence of the library's contents previous are semi-easy to find. Before the library was in South Dakota, in this fictional universe of Warehouse 13, it was in London, and before it was in London, it was in Paris, and before it was in Paris, it was in Rome, and before it was in Rome, it was in other places. One of those places was deep in the desert of Egypt, somewhat close to Alexandria, but that's arbitrary and not entirely accurate. Although it's less than 200 miles from Alexandria to the Geodephrite Pyramid, so the Geodephrite Pyramid could be the City of Pillars, the Warehouse 13 that has been defined, because the converting the letters to numbers, numbers to letters, the pyramids are all architecture, which means that they're all numbers. All those numbers translate to letters, therefore, and there's all kinds of repeat letters going on. So if you have, the rooms are standardized sizes. Well, that room is a block of what? A block of extremely consistent letters. Well, the rooms that have that similar shape are, that's a word sequence. That's a 100% dependable, 100% of the time word sequence. The size of that room, or the room shape, or the step down layered sequences of that room. Well, the mathematics are 100% consistent, which means that those words are 100% consistent, which means those words are dependable depending on what that room is trying to say, based off of numbers become letters. So Paris was the city of pillars, as well as being a warehouse, which means that this information leads to the idea that are the city of pillars, architecturally speaking, are they a retelling in architecture the true story of Genesis, the first book of the Bible? Taking, Moses' translations and such are only count for a very small fraction. Plus, that book, the book of Genesis, used to be hundreds of thousands of times bigger. So that is what I was thinking about. My name is T.R. Welling. Please subscribe to this page and hit that bell for new videos, because I'm obviously making new videos. Thank you so much for your time, and more to come.